Good Wednesday afternoon, everybody. Scott Stevens here as we take a look at weather around the country and some locations around the world where we find items of note that happen to cross my attention. I'll bring them to you. It's still a tough go of it for the Chinese as Beijing has endured an incredible rainstorm. I think it was yesterday or the day before, upwards of 4 inches in about 90 minutes. That kind of rainfall is just would be devastating even without the floods. But when you begin to add the rains that have already fallen, the rivers that are already full, the grounds that are already saturated and can hold no more, an epic rainfall like that just adds kind of chaos to the mix. Good to see you in there, Karen. Hope your day in Pennsylvania was agreeable for this lovely hump day. So what we'll kind of do is pop in here and start in Australia, where it can be kind of a dry continent with all the terrain and the kind of the mountains surrounding the perimeter of that island continent. It is allowed for a very massive, very dry basin. So some good news, we'll be seeing some widespread useful rain, which means a little more than a trace. Maybe more than a few, a millimeter or two here, but maybe enough that it's actually of benefit, meaning that when the clouds clear, the rain just doesn't evaporate with it in a moment's notice, but some substantial rains to fall across that area. So that's some good news. Good to see on there, Risa and Vicky as well. Hope you're having a good old Wednesday. Back to Australian rains. Again, peak totals probably to fall on that southeast portion of the continent, but that is also where the bulk of the population is, so that's kind of the upside of this. We've seen hashtag snow in unusually low-lying parts of southeastern Australia the last few days, from Lansingtown in Tasmania to Colac, and the I shouldn't even try to say these things until I hear them at least once, in Victoria, and then in southern New South Wales. For some areas, it may be many years before it snows once again. So they've had some interesting drone pictures and so forth and so on. And when you don't get much ever, an inch or two or three can really kind of complicate the situations that we've got going on there. Isaias, the hurricane that came ashore in South Carolina the better part of 48 hours ago, now is moving into Canada, and honestly, it's completely absorbed into the westerlies. So the major weather stories stateside is A, that cleanup, and then B, reattention to the west, where the drought goes on, and then we're beginning to see more and more wildfires, some of them arson, some of them accidental, some of them lightning caused, or even equipment failure, as we have seen from time to time. Atlantic tropical cyclones and disturbances from our friends at the National Hurricane Center. Kind of quiet out there in the Atlantic. Just a 10% chance of development. It's small. It's well defined. We'll look at it on water vapor imagery towards the end of this episode. A few hundred miles south of Bermuda, which is right here. And so we'll see what happens. There's some dry air that remains in place. There's some shear. Thunderstorms like to go up, but if you've got winds cutting across them, that really kind of limits their ability to do their business. All right, so what we have been seeing is Beijing. There was that heavy rain from that, where the ground just literally, or the sky opened up and just poured. Beijing had escaped a good part of this flooding simply because of the topography, but not so. This particular storm was just beyond what they can handle, and because there's so much pavement. There's so much pavement. The water has nearly nowhere to go but just to pond, and then to try to let gravity take a hold of it and find the low spot. And once it begins to move to that low spot, we begin to see accelerations. That's not a job I would like, Risa. Having everybody look at you and dissecting your every single word. That's a toughie. So anyway, Beijing, and then it'd have to go into and deal with Chinese words and pronunciations. OMG. All right, another one. See, like these characters mean absolutely, yeah, I couldn't spit that out if I even tried, if my life depended on it. Again, there's just so much water. There's damage. There's destruction. It's that whole Yangtze River Valley. I was reading a long Twitter thread about that valley and how it is responsible for 15% of the manufacturing capacity of the entire planet, with an annual GDP upwards of $6.5 trillion just in that Yangtze. And when you have that river flooded, not able to really deal with any ship shipments, and I think that the number was like 15 million ton feet or cubic feet or some capacity, some descriptor for those shipping containers that have literally just come to a halt because of this flooding. So the manufacturing has come to a halt because people can't get to work, power disruptions, flooding in the structures, and then there's no ability to then ship out that which is put together, that which is manufactured. So this baby has yet to really be appreciated and comprehended, and certainly the stock markets, as we'll talk about in about 50 minutes, do not or have not yet priced in the magnitude of the impact of these floodings on China and what they will eventually result in. This water, for some odd, strange reason, almost looked like it was running backward in the first part of that video, but it's just kind of cascading down. Look at all those folks kind of gathered for the spectacle. So, and we're finally in flood season on top of what's already happened and what's already begun. All right, Owen Prescott, any idea why water is now being released from this section of the GGG, the Three Gorges Dam? Been watching this live stream for weeks. This is the first time I've seen it. I remember first talking about the Three Gorges Dam towards the end of June, and here we are a fat 5 weeks later, potentially coming up on 6 weeks, and this baby is still holding it back, Karen saying Chinese supply chains impact the rest of the world, and the PPE gear that everybody needs or requires for this, so much of it is manufactured in that region of China. So ultimately, if these nations, like they didn't get the shot across the bow in February, March, and April, that they need to get their own supply chains up and processing and capacity restored, it's not going to, the supplies from this region will end or have ended because of this flooding. Governor Ned Lamont, with more than 700,000 outages due to Isaias, I've declared a state of emergency in Connecticut, allowing us to take certain steps to facilitate restoration. And so they're dealing with power outages, and you can begin to see why, with the northeastern U.S. so green, so deciduous, and so susceptible to winds 60, 70. In a few cases, there were gusts to 80 miles an hour in New York City, gusts to 70, which is 74 is the threshold for a hurricane. 33 tornado reports in the Mid-Atlantic, 3.6 million without power along the East Coast, and 9 inches of rain in Maryland. So it was a doozy, even though it didn't get a lot of, it did get headlines, but it didn't look like it was going to be that big of an event, because so many of these hurricanes we've had, once they hit land, they just go, oh, I give up. This one held strong. There was a lot of rotational energy, and that indicated by the sheer quantity of tornadoes that came ashore. So it began just off the coast of Africa, and we watched it hold on through the easterly trade winds just south of Puerto Rico, across the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and then it traversed a portion of the eastern Mid-Atlantic and southeastern U.S., and then was declared a non-event or dissipated as it crossed into the St. Lawrence River Valley. So really quite an adventure. 4,017 miles Isaias traveled along the path, and it took a period of 13 days. So it's not like for a good period of time it was not. It was in the headlines. And there we see 4-hour estimated or 48-hour estimated precipitation. So heavy rains. These are places where they're big rivers, but also 9 inches, 8 inches, 5 inches in a short amount of time is going to begin to put those up and towards bankful, if not just a little bit over bankful. So that's kind of where Isaias ended. And what we're looking at, and we started off the show with this baby, this one that will bring the cold weather to portions of Australia, that big deep trough. Usually we don't get to see too many incursions of closed lows dropping into the middle part of Australia, but that's going to happen before the weekend is out, and we'll probably see some snow in there. Friday's show. Friday we'll probably see some of that. Back over to China. And I'm going to run this back all the way here so we can kind of see the outline. Here's the country right on here, India here, and it's not like India hasn't been dealing with this, and Pakistan, and Myanmar, and Laos, and Vietnam, and Korea. The rains in here have just been unbelievable. So, come on, there we go. Let's run this all the way up to 2 weeks. And probably the thing we're looking for is this upper end of the scale. When we get into the pinks, we're between 15 120 inches worth of rainfall, or 400 to 500 millimeters, and right on the DMZ between North and South Korea. Looks like it's one of the hot spots. And then again, still the uplands, those higher terrains which provide the drainage for all of these rivers, and China still going to be receiving some exceptional rain, as well as the coastal areas on the eastern side of the Bay of Bengal and also into western India. So this flooding season is not and has not come to an end by absolutely any stretch of the imagination. All right, North Pole is here. We've got Scandinavia here. Russia's all the way through here. And what we're looking at is the jet stream, and where it is warmer than normal, taller than normal, is where we find the oranges, and it kind of begins to shade into the red, like that nice little hot zone across the Arctic Circle in northern Canada towards the end of the period. But look how much blue there is, and darker blues shading into greens. And this is where we're beginning to see a little more of a fall type of situation, and some cooler air through Alaska, through Siberia, dropping big time east of the Urals into eastern and pretty much eastern Russia. Much cooler than normal weather beginning to manifest there, and then work on through Tibet. So that's kind of a heralding of the arrival of fall on the larger scale, that those lows are starting to gather, they're starting to maintain their identity and integrity, and will begin to usher in some cooler weather. The monsoon is kind of in place out west. Not a lot of rain. We had some big rains erupt in Colorado yesterday and then migrate across Oklahoma through the nighttime hours in what we typically call a mesoscale complex. Some even lighter rains in the panhandle of Texas, but they really got going as they moved into Oklahoma and then they crossed the Red River Valley and into Texas. This is kind of the debris of it right in here as it faded away as we moved through the day, and waiting for another one to erupt here. And this is what keeps the high plains green in the summertime. It's these rains that allow the farmers to do dry land farming, to make a productive living out of these, what typically, back in the 1800s, they called it the American desert, because it was, until we kind of sculpted it, threw in some trees, did a little bit of irrigation, then we really disturbed the topsoil, and then that ended up with the Dust Bowl. And so we've learned some conservation matters in between then and now. Not completely. We still have lessons to learn, but nonetheless, it's looking better. Not much happening out here. We've got clouds, we've got thunderstorms, but no big news, no big headlines. There's a few severe storms outside of Colorado Springs, some into New Mexico. New Mexico deep in drought, so every drop of rain that comes out of sky is a good thing. And then here's what's left of the storms that popped up in southeastern Colorado last night and rolled down through Texas, Oklahoma, Texas, and now into Louisiana, just about to emerge out into the Gulf Coast. There's the severe weather. So we had some pretty cool photographies from some of the storm chasers in eastern Oklahoma, trying to chase these storms once again. No real severe weather, but pretty pictures. Woke up this morning. This was midnight Eastern time, and look how cool it was last evening. We're barely halfway through the night. Yeah, Karen, wild yellow clouds. Let me show you what that is. Explain this. Yellow is dry. Yellow, we're actually over here looking at the water vapor. So instead of sensing clouds, it's seeing how much water or moisture there is for the clouds to then form from. So the vapor being like the blues, and then as the storm pushes through, you get this little pulse of drier air behind it, and that gives us the refreshing dry conditions after a cool front comes through, especially this time of year. All right, so that's kind of what that product is, and it's always been one of my favorites because doing most of my work in the western states, it's typically dry. It doesn't matter the season, it's typically dry. So the water vapor is very good at picking out the clouds, and then where the stream of moisture, those atmospheric rivers that has become all the rage, that terminology, it really shows those very, very clearly. All right, let's go from the early morning lows to the afternoon. It still didn't really recover that much in Michigan today, still just the 70s, as they're about 7 o'clock evening time, so they're definitely well past max heating for the day, but comfortable all the way into Florida, 80s and 70s as a result of those thunderstorms. So the heat really focused West Texas and out of the west. The east is absolutely cooler than normal. And part of that, here's Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, with a cool front that made it all the way to the Gulf Coast. And where are we? 4, 5 August? This is unprecedented. It became stationary once we got there, but still through the bulk of Louisiana, we've got a light north breeze. That is crazy. crazy. When I was working in Oklahoma in the early 90s, we didn't see this until maybe the 15th, 20th of August. And then even then, if it made it all the way to the Red River, that was an accomplishment. So here we are. We've pushed this cool front all the way down to the Gulf Coast, which is definitely an accomplishment. And some chilly high pressure settled in, so for maybe well, it will guarantee a cool night tonight, but probably not so much in the course of record lows. We can look at that right here. Maybe one record low high or record low highs for tomorrow, but low nighttime lows. They're just low minimums, just zero across the board, so nothing in there. And even record highs today. We're into West Texas where we've got Dalhart and Marfa at 104, 103. So hot, but not terribly crazy. So as we move through this ridge that has kept that heat out west and then the cool low pressure in the east, that kind of is going to be the pattern. That remains as we move out 96 hours, 90 hours. The jet stream comes through. Canada really hasn't dealt with any heat. Yes, up north in those northern locations, they get some 60s and 70s versus, say, 50s. So, yes, that's abnormal, but not ridiculously slow. And when you're up there this time of year, those are very, very comfortable readings, and you're kind of grateful for the warmth because you've only got a few weeks left. You're losing 7, 8, 9 minutes of sunshine a day as we've hit the end of solar summer today. We've had the 3 sunniest months behind us from the 5th of May till the 5th of August. The next 3 months from the 5th of August till the 5th of November are the 3 months that we lose the greatest amount of daylight. And then by the 5th of November, we begin like solar winter. So we've got 3 months ahead of us where the cool weather comes on in. All right, the longer range models begin to spin up a couple of tropical storms. These are notoriously I don't want to say in error, but they love to spin up these kind of crazy events that look like they're going to happen, but rarely do they ever. But the cool weather is definitely in store for Canada and the western U.S. Cooler than normal, but eastbound of, say, the Continental Divide, at or above normal. That's kind of the headlines. And you get sad because you like summer. I do too, Risa. August is kind of a tumultuous month for me. It's back to school. The days you can tell, especially by about the 20th of August, you can absolutely sense that the shadows are longer. The sun isn't as strong as it was. It's just the whole psychology, probably triggered by physiological changes, are done. The birds have all flown the nest. The garden, you're deep into harvesting, if not have already harvested. So that eventuality that summer is drawn to a close really kind of sets in. And then I had my dad pass during that time, so there's always kind of a little melancholiness as we get into the middle of August. Fall fill, and if you're deep into Texas, then you're just bloody grateful for that light north wind, because deep into Texas, winters are just glorious, I think. I would, never been there. I've been in Oklahoma, gone through a couple of years in Oklahoma, and I really enjoyed that. All right, guys, I got a show coming up at 6 o'clock. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. There's more and more news about the government literally just gorging on debt to satisfy the economy's requirements for stimulus, for replacement income, for paycheck protection. And that's in the process, or ultimately will result in some kind of a crisis, some crisis that is usually rooted in confidence. So we'll talk about some things that you can do. You can do from literally sitting where you are right now to put a little safety net underneath you for the times that are coming. And if it doesn't come, regardless, you've got a different kind of investment that ultimately could reward you very, very handsomely. All right, we'll talk about that in about exactly 40 minutes. I'll see you then. Same channel, same bad place. This is Scott. We'll see you tomorrow for another look at weather. In the meantime, hey, keep looking up.